The news, the rivalry between GOP presidential candidates Donald Trump and Ted Cruz is on like Donkey Kong. In the final stretch before the New Hampshire primary, the war of words between Cruz and Trump is getting nasty and ugly. The billionaire businessman accusing the Texas senator of cheating his way to victory in the Iowa caucus. Trump is threatening to sue over a message Cruz's camp sent reportedly to some 1,500 Iowa precincts in the heat of the race on Monday night. And that message strongly suggested that Dr. Ben Carson had dropped out. The Donald saying what Cruz did was a dirty trick, and he may bring a lawsuit.
I think what he did is disgusting. He said that Ben Carson, who's a fantastic guy, had dropped out of the race during the caucus. He had dropped out of the race and vote for Ted Cruz. All of those people come and vote for Ted Cruz, and many of them did. I think it was a disgrace that he did it, and I don't think it should be even allowed. I think those votes should be taken away, and there were plenty of them.
Carson is also blaming Cruz for his weak Iowa showing. Senator Cruz, who has since called that message a mistake and apologized to Dr. Carson, is firing back at Donald Trump, saying the Iowa runner-up is acting like a child.
It is no surprise that Donald is throwing yet another temper tantrum, or if you like, yet another Trumper tantrum. It seems his reaction to everything is to throw a fit, to engage in insult. But at the end of the day, the Iowa people spoke. Donald Trump guaranteed a victory in Iowa, and then he lost. And he doesn't like that, and his reaction is that he breaks down.
So Trump making the comments on radio that he was thinking about suing. It's a possibility that he might do it. Don't really know how it would work. The party puts on the caucus, not the state. But let's start with the elephant in the room, if we can, Judge. What do you make of these accusations against Ted Cruz, and should there be any ramifications?
Well, first of all, I think they're extremely damaging to Cruz because he's always presented himself as, I'm not one of them. I'm not one of the establishment. And everybody's looking at this going, well, this is politics as usual. This is the typical garbage that we hate about politicians, about political campaigns. What a lot of people, I think, aren't going to be surprised to hear is it's not illegal for politicians to lie to you. You know, if it were, we would have a whole bunch of jail cells dedicated to every representative, senator, and the President of the United States. So people are aware of that, but there's this sense that if you're going to position yourself as somebody other than who you are, then you're going to pay for it at some point. Now, there are two things here, though. There's the flyer, the voter violation flyer, and there's the statement about Dr. Carson's out of the race. The statement about Dr. Carson's out of the race, I don't know if he knew, he didn't know, the campaign played fast and loose with the facts or whatever, but, you know, that is, even if it's a lie, okay, TV stations have to run politicians' ads, even that they know are lies. They're required to, because the First Amendment protects political speech more than commercial speech, more than any other speech. They have to, and the idea being that more speech. As far as the flyer, I differ on that one from some of my colleagues. I do believe that there is a potential action there.
Really?
Yes, because in Iowa, if the caucus is viewed as a primary, which I believe it is, Iowa law says that under the rules that govern primaries, coercing or attempting to coerce people to vote. It doesn't just apply to voting. It applies to coercing them not to vote, intimidating them not to vote, or to vote. But coercing or attempting to coerce somebody to vote in Iowa is a felony.
And you've seen this flyer. I read it.
Yeah,
it's about kind of shaming the voter into going to the polls. Other politicians have done that.
I agree.
Did an
Iowa and I'm not a big
card.
And I'm not a big fan of the argument of other politicians have done this, so therefore I should do it too. And I'm not saying that anybody should bring an action under that statute. I think it's an extreme way to use the statute. I'm just saying technically the argument could be made, and I'm surprised that somebody like Trump, who's looking for every possibility to get the upper hand, hasn't made the argument that it's
well, after seeing you on Outnumbered, you know, maybe he will. Maybe he'll do that. Can we talk a little bit, though, about how different these states are, though, for caucuses and primaries, and not just regard to how that actually works, methodology between a caucus and a primary, but the people in those states? Because, Andrea, I know there's this New York Times article today that talks about that sort of nastiness, that acrimony that we're seeing play out now between particularly these two men, Trump and Cruz, might not fly too well in New Hampshire.
No, the headline in the New York Times is that the voters are looking for a softer tone, so the candidates are are responding to that, especially women in New Hampshire. This would be great for Donald Trump if it were going into South Carolina. But unfortunately, he's dragging Iowa into New Hampshire, which I think is not rational. I think it's a huge political miscalculation, Harris. You look at New Hampshire, he's #1. He's in the lead.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do anything. He thinks that Cruz voters are naturally his voters. But what he doesn't understand is Cruz isn't a threat to him in New Hampshire. He should not be attacking anyone. You know what he should do? He should be shaking the hands of dock workers in Portsmouth. He should be doing town halls. He has to learn the lessons of Iowa. Get on the ground, not attack anyone. Let Chris Christie take on Marco Rubio. But Christie needs to do well in New Hampshire, Harris. If Bush or Kasich comes in before Chris Christie,
good point.
Yeah,
Christie will have to drop out.
And you see him positioning himself today against Marco Rubio. And I want to ask you about this because you may have segued there anyway. But Dr. Ben Carson, you see Donald Trump stepping up and defending him. Is that maybe in hopes of getting his votes? Is that a smart move?
Well, this started out a Carson-Cruz fight, and Donald Trump stepped in, and it's a Trump-Cruz fight. I spoke to Chris Christie this morning, and I asked him specifically about that. He said, it is not a good idea for these guys to be dragging Iowa into New Hampshire. In fact, he stopped and would not even respond to this fighting because he didn't think it was a good idea for him to engage in that. His fight is with Marco Rubio. As Charles Krauthammer pointed out on Fox last night, he said, all this fighting with these guys up at the top tier, it presents a big opportunity for a guy like Marco Rubio and for Chris Christie and Kasich and these guys that are trying to make, maybe have their last shot here in New Hampshire to make their move. So
and Trump shouldn't be making the argument because he's the one who clearly benefits from attacking Cruz and saying those votes shouldn't be counted. So it looks very opportunistic.
But you raise
somebody else.
Yeah, you raise a good point. You raise an excellent point. You've got the New York Times reports today that Jeb Bush and Chris Christie, in a very unprecedented move, are teaming up with each other to try to get Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
So both of them know they have to be the governor. I don't know who determined that whoever is first among governors is going to do well. I think you have to be first among all people running, not just governors, but the two governors of the three who are still in the race have now teamed up to try to get Marco Rubio in the hopes that they can damage Rubio, and then they go on to South Carolina and, in Bush's case, Florida, with a damaged Rubio. I will say, for that softer tone that you were talking about with women, I think for Chris Christie to stand up yesterday and to say that he's going to, quote-unquote, beat Hillary Clinton's rear end is probably not what women are looking for.
It wasn't the softer tone.
It wasn't the softer tone.
Depends on the woman, I suppose.
Well, maybe. Excellent point, but Chris Christie's probably not anybody's fantasy of
we know you don't love him, Julie. He's not on a poster on your refrigerator.
He's no Anthony Sabato Jr. on my high school wall, I'll tell you that.
This is starting to sound like a drinking game.
I know, right?
Antonio Sabato, you.
But I think you do raise a very good point as well when you're talking about what Trump is doing. Trump should Trump's whole aura is being a winner. He sounds like a loser. He sounds like a sore loser. He's got to go back to the fact that he is so far winning, quote unquote, not to quote Charlie Sheen, in New Hampshire, and own that.
Is there anything to the winnerliness of Donald Trump, is a word I just made up, and going to Arkansas? I mean, I'm sure you see now Donald Trump in the home of the Clintons and saying, look, they left you. When they come back, they're not going to do anything for you.
Well, he was a winner there. He beat ZZ Top's audience count, so that was the goal, and he achieved that.
Right.
But look, I think that the female vote in New Hampshire is huge to watch here. Mostly moderate Republicans, independents, more women than men undecided on who they're going to vote for. Does it look good? I'll ask Andrea, does it look good for the Republicans to be engaging in all this fighting heading into New Hampshire where they're targeting the women to vote?
It doesn't look good, but it's necessary. They have to do this kind of stuff. What I don't understand is Donald Trump doesn't need to. You're right, he should use surrogates. This is when surrogates come into play. He needs to let Iowa go. Because, look, he can go after Ted Cruz if you're going into a state like a South Carolina, where Cruz could be a real threat in the Bible Belt. This is not the time for that. He's #1. He needs to own it. He needs to move forward. I know that he thinks that he really won. That's what he said yesterday. He said, well, I really won, technically, because there was foul play. And I know he wants those Carson voters. But now is not the time.
So let me ask you, because I mean, just in following social media, you see Trump followers, and they're scratching their heads as to why he hasn't moved on to that next thing. Why do you think it is?
That he hasn't let go of Iowa?
Yeah.
I think it's ego. I don't think he can stand the idea of...
So there's no strategy.
By the way, I don't know why people keep saying he lost. That's his definition of losing. That's not a reasonable definition of losing.
They're a delegate apart.
Yeah, no,
They're a delegate apart.
It's ridiculous to say that he lost Iowa.
That's Ricky Bobby's definition.
But I think in his... I think in his mind, I don't think he can stand to have people perceive him as having lost, and he just can't let it go. This can't be a legitimate win. It has to be. He stole the election.
It's the aura of being a winner. He has to be a winner.
The winnerliness.
Yes, even if he's one delegate apart, he's still not a winner.
But by the way, that's something that Trump supporters love about Donald Trump. They want to back a winner. They want to back somebody who doesn't want to be
number one. He shouldn't squander that. Let Chris Christie and others take on Marco Rubio, who's surging to second in New Hampshire. And Chris Christie has to do well. He has to take second or third here. He cannot place behind Kasich or Bush.
When we come back to this topic,
is going to be
probably
Rubio.
tomorrow, my next question will be, are they battling over the establishment seat? And is that a way forward in an election when there's so many people supporting outsiders? I mean, when you look at them kind of battling over Marco Rubio, there's always tomorrow.